Let us read Proverbs 28, verses 21. To show partiality is not good, but for a piece of bread a man will do wrong. There's a story told about a judge in a small town who was known for his fairness. One day, two men stood before him. One dressed in fine clothing, clearly wealthy and influential, and the other in worn garments, a laborer with little to his name. As the case unfolded, the courtroom subtly shifted. People leaned toward the wealthy man, assuming his importance meant his innocence. But the judge, after listening carefully, ruled in favor of the poor man. When asked later why he seemed unmoved by the wealthy man's status, the judge simply said, "In this courtroom, I do not see wealth or poverty. I see truth." That simple statement captures something deeply aligned with the heart of God. And yet, if we are honest, it is not always how we see the world. We tend to notice status, influence, appearance, and background. We lean toward those who benefit us and overlook those who do not. This is a subtle and dangerous sin the Bible calls partiality. This proverb speaks with remarkable clarity. It first names the issue, partiality, favoritism, treating people differently based on personal bias rather than truth. Then it exposes the root of the problem. The human heart is so easily swayed that even a small reward can lead us into injustice. Partiality is more than just a social flaw. It is a spiritual issue. It reflects a distorted view of people. When we show favoritism, we are no longer seeing others as God sees them. Scripture reminds us that every human being is created in the image of God. Every person carries inherent dignity, not because of what they possess, but because of who made them. And more than that, Christ paid the same price for all. The ground at the foot of the cross is level. No one stands higher and no one lower. The Apostle Paul reminds us in Romans that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That truth humbles us. It strips away pride and comparison. It reminds us that we all come the same way, through grace, through faith in the finished work of Christ. When that truth settles deeply into our hearts, it becomes much harder to treat others with partiality. And yet, we live in a world where favoritism is everywhere. It shows up in workplaces, in communities, in leadership, and sometimes even in the church. Decisions are influenced not by what is right, but by who is involved. Truth takes a backseat to preference. And when that happens, something begins to erode. Truth is lost. Justice is compromised. Integrity is weakened. The Bible consistently warns against this. In Leviticus 19:15, God commands, "Do not pervert justice. Do not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the great." The instruction is balanced and clear. Do not be swayed in either direction. Justice must stand on truth alone. In Deuteronomy 10, verse 17, God is described as the one who shows no partiality and accepts no bribes. This is not just a command God gives, it is a reflection of his very nature. He is perfectly just, perfectly fair, perfectly impartial. This truth becomes even more powerful when we look at how God deals with people throughout Scripture. At first glance, someone might think God favored Israel above all others. But a closer look reveals something deeper. Israel was chosen not because they were better, but for a purpose. to be a light to the nations. And when they sinned, God did not excuse them. He judged them with the same righteousness He applies to all. In the New Testament, this truth becomes even clearer when Peter enters the house of Cornelius, a Gentile. He makes a profound realization. In Acts chapter 10, verse 34 to 35, he says, "Truly I understand that God shows no partiality, but in every nation, everyone who fears Him and does what is right is acceptable to Him." This was a turning point, not just for Peter, but for the early church. It shattered the assumption that God's favor was limited to a particular group. It revealed that God's grace extends to all who come to Him in faith. Paul echoes the same truth in Romans 2, where he declares that God will render to each one according to his works, and concludes with his powerful statement, "For God shows no partiality." What a sobering reminder. God does not evaluate us based on our status, background, or outward appearance. He looks at the heart. He judges with perfect righteousness. This truth also challenges how we relate to others. In Galatians 2, Paul recounts his interaction with influential leaders in Jerusalem. He makes it clear that their status did not impress him because God shows no partiality. Even within the church, where hierarchy and influence can easily creep in, the gospel levels the field. Paul goes even further in addressing social structures of his time. In Ephesians chapter 6, verse 9, he speaks directly to masters, telling them to treat their servants justly, knowing that they share the same master in heaven and there is no partiality with him. And in Colossians 3:25, he reminds everyone that the wrongdoer will be paid back for the wrong he has done and there is no partiality. These words cut across every layer of society. They remind us that before God, all human distinctions fade. We are accountable to Him equally and individually. James brings this even closer to home. In James chapter 2, verse 1 to 4, he rebukes believers for showing favoritism to the rich while dishonoring the poor. He calls it what it is: sinful discrimination. It is not a small issue. It is a contradiction of the faith we profess. And perhaps that's what makes partiality so dangerous. It often appears small. It can feel harmless, a slight preference here, a subtle bias there. But Proverbs exposes the deeper reality. For a piece of bread, a man will do wrong. A piece of bread represents something small, almost insignificant, and yet it is enough to lead someone into injustice. This is how compromise begins, not with great acts of corruption, but with small concessions, a little favor in exchange for a benefit, a quiet overlooking of truth for the sake of convenience. Scripture repeatedly warns about this. In Exodus 23, verse 8, says, "Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds those who see and twists the words of the innocent." Ecclesiastes 7, verse 7 tells us that a bribe corrupts the heart. And in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10, Paul reminds us that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Do you see the pattern? It's not just about large-scale injustice. It's about the small moments where integrity is tested. The quiet decisions no one else sees. The subtle choices where we either stand for what is right or bend toward what is beneficial. Partiality often begins there, in the unseen places of the heart. Even in families, we see the damage it can cause. The story of Isaac and Rebekah shows how favoritism between children led to division and deception. What seemed like preference grew into conflict that affected generations. And consider David, a man after God's own heart. Yet when he sinned, God did not overlook it because of his position. He faced consequences. God's justice remained steady, impartial, and true. So what does it mean for us today? It means we must examine our hearts honestly. Are we treating people differently based on what they can offer us? Are we valuing some more than others because of status, appearance, or background? Are we compromising truth for small gains, approval, comfort, or convenience? It also means recognizing that integrity is formed in the small moments. The proverb reminds us that if we cannot resist a piece of bread, we will struggle when greater temptations come. Character is not built in the spotlight. It is shaped in the ordinary decisions of daily life. And most importantly, it calls us to reflect the character of God. If God shows no partiality, then his children should reflect the same heart. In a world deeply divided by bias and favoritism, we have the opportunity to live differently, to see people as God sees them, to treat others with dignity, fairness, and love. This is not always easy. It requires humility. It requires surrender. It requires us to lay down our preferences and align ourselves with God's truth. But it is also deeply powerful. When we choose integrity over convenience, when we choose fairness over favoritism, when we choose truth over personal gain, we become a living testimony of God's character. We become, as scripture says, the fragrance of Christ in a broken world. So today, hold on to this truth. Partiality may seem small, but it reveals the condition of the heart. And integrity may seem costly, but it reflects the nature of God. Ask the Lord to search your heart. Invite him to reveal any hidden bias, any quiet compromise, and then by his grace, choose to walk in integrity. Because in the end, it is not what we gain from people that matters, but how faithfully we reflect the one who shows no partiality at all. God bless.